On Friday, I took part in the dad's race at Sports Day. St John's School do Sports Day pretty early in May, but took place on Friday. I actually took part twice because Ernie is in a different group to the girls. So 2 dads' races. Came somewhere in the middle of the pack. I was fairly pleased with that. It wasn't too bad. Dave Matheson absolutely destroyed me, but it was okay. Today, I am in agony. My legs are absolutely killing me. I absolutely went for it, full-out sprint for 40 meters, and my legs are really, really hurting today. Because I was using muscles that I don't normally use. I am not a sprinter at all. I'm probably using some muscles I do use, but not in the way I normally use them. I'm not sort of going full pelt at normal times of the day. Lament is a muscle that perhaps we don't use very often, or perhaps just haven't used that much, or maybe never even used before. So it could feel a bit awkward, a little bit hard work. It might actually feel uncomfortable to start to dig into what lament is. But it is a tool that God gives us, and it is absolutely worth having available at the right time. As we've seen so far in this life of David, David was a man of integrity in the waiting, allowing God to work and not take matters into his own hands. He was a friend, understood covenant relationship and lived it out. He was a man of faith, knowing he was the top dog because God was on his side. And he was a servant, not barging his way into the palace, into the king's courts, but quietly, faithfully serving in the place that God had put him. He was a man after God's heart. But he was also a man that faced significant challenges throughout his life. And so he learned to bring God in prayer and in song into his situations by lament. And now, actually, Jen is going to be sharing the majority of what we're going to look at this morning. She's going to be speaking to us out of Psalm 13 and helping us to understand what biblical lament looks like and help us, give us some tools, give us a model for what healthy lament looks like and how it can play a part in a healthy biblical lifestyle. So I have the privilege, I think for the first time, to invite my dear and wonderful wife to come and speak to us this morning. Should we give her a cheer?
Good morning, everybody. This feels very bizarre for me. I'm used to teaching and standing in front of lots of people, but they're normally little. So this is my first time having a go at preaching. So to make me feel a little bit more comfortable, I'm going to start with getting some people to put their hands up. So raise a hand if you believe the following is important in our walk with Jesus. Gratitude. Good. Praising and worshipping God. Prayer. Looking towards our future hope with God. The eternal hope we have with Jesus. Good. What about recognizing the challenging situations we're in? And sharing our real emotions and pain with God and asking for his help. Brilliant. So that is I think that was all of us, which is great. Just to say, younger people, I have done some sermon note pages that are at the back. So if you want to grab one of those and take some notes, you're very welcome, but don't feel you have to. So we have all said it is important. It's important to share our emotions and our pain. So it's important that we learn how to do that well. And thankfully, David was someone that learned how to bring the challenges and messes he faced to God in a healthy and productive way. So we are going to learn from him this morning. So what is lament? Someone asked me that this morning. What is biblical lament? And in the Gospel Coalition, they say lament is expressing sorrow and grief over travesty, injustices, sicknesses, death, or other brokenness within a fallen world. This includes the ramifications of sin within a fallen world and the emotional responses to those sins and how they affect you. So it's an expression of pain, and the sin in our lives and in the world today. And the lament that we're focusing on in Psalm 13 today is a personal lament. But David also shows us in other psalms that some group laments. So this one is an individual lament where David is expressing deep anguish, where he is on the verge of despair and his endurance is spent. So I'm going to read Psalm 13 now, so if you want to turn to it, feel free. I believe it is going to pop up, is it? Great. It's there. Amazing. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts, and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. So in this passage, there's 3 clear sections. So it begins with how long, where he's expressing his feeling. Then there's a prayer for help, and then he is reaffirming his trust in God. So part 1, expressing feelings. David is sharing his raw emotions here. He begins with how long, which is repeated 4 times. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Can anyone relate to this? Have you ever felt like you've been forgotten by God? That those promises which Craig spoke about last week have been forgotten? Like he's hiding and he has abandoned you? I know that I have. But David, he's not asking for a response in this bit. He's expressing that he feels unable to endure his pain any longer. David's heart cries are not a reflection on where God really is or how God feels about David. It's David's perception. It's perceived abandonment. He is a man of God, after God's own heart, yet he wrestles with his thoughts and is filled with sorrow. Being followers of Jesus, sadly, doesn't exempt us from trouble. It doesn't mean that everything will be fair or make sense, but God does promise to be with us through it all. Jesus suffered. He shared in our humanity, in the pain and struggles, yet he remained faithful to his Father. So here, David is open. He is raw. He doesn't sugarcoat each line with, but I know you haven't abandoned me. I know you are there. I know there are more awful things happening in the world. He just says it how it is. And I'm going to speak about that a little bit more later. The second thing David does in this song is he prays for help. He says, look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes. So here, David's asking for something. He doesn't just sit in misery, in a well of self-pity, saying, well, this is never going to change. But he brings it to God, who he knows can help him. And thirdly, he reaffirms his trust in the Lord. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. He declares what he knows to be true. Even when he is in the depths of despair, he knows these truths about God stand firm. And I think it can often be like that when we're singing worship songs. We might not feel in a place like we were singing this morning of joy. I've got joy all the time. I'm happy. But actually we can declare those things as we sing. He's confident in God's steadfast love. He knows that there is salvation in God's name, and he continues to sing his praises. And as I was preparing this, I was looking at, well, how can we apply this to our lives? And actually, it made me reflect on something we did in our life group this week. We were reflecting on Craig's talk of promises that God has fulfilled in our lives, and then promises that we're waiting for. And we were talking about prophetic words and promises that have been fulfilled, and actually how important it is to record those. And some of us were saying, oh yeah, actually I don't really remember some of the promises that God's given me because I haven't written them down. So I'd encourage you, and this is for me as well, to record what God has done for you in the past, because when we reflect on the promises that he has fulfilled, it can help us to sing his praises even in the hard times. Draw on friends, worshipping God and scripture to remind you of the goodness of our God. So 3 things that we can take away from David's model of lament. Number 1, it's healthy. It's healthy to lament. And I know it is uncomfortable for some people, and it feels like we're being in that emotion maybe for too long, but actually it's about those 3 parts. So like it or not, we do all have emotions. And as I was reading through the Lament studying for today, it reminded me of the core emotion wheel from connection codes that we heard about from Kate Lee a few weeks ago. The idea being to work through 8 core emotions regularly to allow ourselves to recognize and process the emotions that we're feeling. The core emotions wheel, John and I have been practicing this within our marriage and also having a go with our kids. And it's been so life-giving for us. It's given us structure for sharing these emotions and we're not allowed to immediately defend ourselves if we feel like what they're sharing isn't what we meant. But just listening to the person, sharing and responding with a version of ooh. So we found that emotions that we have previously carried around for ages, maybe hours, days, weeks, or just held on to before, are being aired and lifted off us. And it has really made a big difference. One example, it's funny because it is to do with the dishwasher, which is one example that they shared in their podcast. But John hadn't done the dishwasher and he said he would. So I just said to him, I'm angry. He was like, oh, what have I missed? I said, you didn't do the dishwasher, and said you would. And then that was done. He said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even know I said I would. But that would be something that previously I would have held on to that annoyance. So it's been really powerful, and I'd really encourage you to have a go. If you want to know more about it, then John or I are happy to chat with you, or Matt and Kate when they're here. So using a biblical model for lament encourages our spiritual, emotional, and physical health because we are holistic beings. Number 2, it's purposeful. Lament is not wallowing in self-pity. It is actively working through the challenges of life, inviting God into them and going to God. So we see this in Psalm 13. Once David has shared the pain, despair, grief, he moves on to asking God for help and praising our God who is all-powerful, declaring his trust in God. Remembering that God is in control and he sees what we don't. As we lift our eyes, we are shifting our perspective from our circumstances to God and onto the eternal hope we have in Jesus. And he doesn't just lament once. Like, it's okay to do it again. Like, you don't go, right, I've done that bit now. Couldn't leave that. When we're facing challenges, the best thing, the only thing to do is go to God. Tell him how we feel and what is happening. Ask him for help and then choose to trust him. So it is healthy. It is purposeful. And the final thing is I've written, do it. So last week we sung about joy, about feeling joy in the morning and in the evening. Living in the joy of the Lord does not mean suppressing the hurt, the lonely, the anger, the sad, the fear, the guilt, and the shame. But the joy of the Lord is our strength in spite of those things. When we learn to acknowledge and process emotions, which can feel negative or difficult, brings freedom. Leaving emotions unprocessed can have serious consequences for both our physical and mental health. But processing them well brings us back to our natural or supernatural norm, joy. I'm going to share a little story from my life that shows the impact of unprocessed emotions. There have been a few moments in life that have been gut-wrenchingly hard, and also seemingly minor daily struggles that require me to process what I'm feeling and entrust the good, the bad, and the ugly to God. I struggle with anxiety. It's sometimes a little murmur in the background in my life, and at other times it's been pretty crippling. It's been something I've battled with since I was quite young, and it is something I believe there is freedom from. I'm not going, right, I'm an anxious person, I'm going to live like this forever, but at the moment it is something that is still a battle. So if it's something you are struggling with, and you've been like, I've prayed for years about this might have been what I said to John the other day, is anything going to change? Actually, yeah, God can change it. So keep praying and keep asking for freedom. So it all came to a bit of a soggy mess in May 2022. John and I were finally able to celebrate our 10-year anniversary, which was delightful, 2 years late because of COVID. And I was incredibly grateful for an opportunity to have a night away without the kids, in the first time in probably 3 years. And it was amazing. However, we returned from our trip to our friends to watch Eurovision, and I just couldn't stop crying, and I promise you it wasn't Matt and Ruth. They were not making me sad. It might have been Eurovision. And I just couldn't stop the tears. And it wasn't just that night. I couldn't stop the tears when I came to church the next day, and for days. I'd wake up feeling exhausted, go to bed feeling exhausted, and cry at many moments in between. As for everyone, COVID was an unusual time. Something we hadn't experienced. Some of you may have liked the chance to stay at home and it be a bit quieter. I, on the other hand, had an 8-week-old baby, a 2-year-old and an almost 5-year-old who suddenly needed homeschooling. Within less than 2 years of us becoming church leaders of this lovely church, we had to adapt our whole approach to online, navigating Teams and Zoom and how to support and engage people when there was so much confusion and fear and pain. So although I appreciated not having to drag my teeny baby out on school runs and rushing about to different places and appointments, but there was also so much I was missing. Support from my friends and my family and medical professionals. He had his health visitor appointment cancelled, allowing people to share in my joy of my new baby boy and giving him the chance to get to know people who are dear to us, including our fabulous church family. Only having contact with people through the glass in a window or a computer screen for the first 4 months of his life. I was so sad to be missing baby groups, maternity leave with my friends, and watching our little ones grow up together. So I felt sad. This is a little bit of the core emotion wheel. I felt sad that my girls had to stop seeing their friends without understanding why. I felt fear for us catching COVID and becoming seriously unwell, especially my new baby. I felt lonely, spending lots of time just with the children while John spent hours working and working out how to do church online. I felt joy for the sunshine, that we had a garden to enjoy and that my children had each other to play with. I felt anger that this was happening to our world. I felt guilt for not helping people I knew were struggling and not being present enough for my kids. There was so much else going on, but what I did tell myself was it's not as bad as what others are facing. At least you're all healthy. At least your kids have someone to play with. At least you've got a garden. It's not as bad. You're in a good position. So that is all true, and that is all stuff to be grateful for, and I am incredibly grateful for all of those things. But rather than validating my emotions and processing the pain, I shrugged them off, telling myself it could have been worse and to get on with it. It wouldn't have been right for me to stay in that place of despair and be like, woe is me, but bringing them to God, laying them before him and allowing him to work, to heal, would have been the healthy thing to do. Our emotions are our emotions. Where we are in life and what we face is real. Just because someone else seems to be going through struggles that appear more desperate or harder than ours does not diminish our emotions or what we're facing. God cares. He cares when I feel guilty sending my daughter into school when she's sad. He cares when I feel angry about the mistreatment of children that I have met as a teacher and in our nation. None of my emotions take away from the fact that we worship an incredible God who sacrificed his son to save us. It doesn't draw away from the fact that I know he loves me. I know he has good plans for me. I know that he is faithful in the storms. God can handle our big emotions. He created us. He knows us. But let's also declare the truth, not to hide our seemingly challenging emotions, but to say, I know you can work all things for good. And what I'd encourage you to do is not to walk this alone, but to walk with someone you trust, someone who will hear you, who will say, this sucks with you, but also to pray for a change, to pray for integrity in the waiting, to point you to God, our providing and our loving Father, to have faith when you are struggling. And that is something I have found incredibly valuable, is doing that. So after my big season of crying, I met up with friends. I met up and I went for a walk with Ruth. I met up and I went for a walk with my friend Maggie, and just being able to talk and share and also look at our amazing God was so helpful. We're going to end our morning together in communion, and I will hand you over to John for that.